Good afternoon and welcome to this session of the Digital Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee and an evidence session on our inquiry into addictive and immersive technologies. We're very grateful for the representatives both from Epic Games and Electronic Arts for joining us, particularly representatives of the companies who've travelled from the United States to be here for the evidence session this afternoon. We're grateful for your time and commitment to the evidence session. I wonder if I could start with some questions, firstly directed at Epic Games regarding Fortnite, the global phenomenon of a game that you make. I'm sure you'll be familiar with the remarks that Prince Harry made about Fortnite, which pretty unprecedented for a member of the royal family to talk about a commercial organisation, particularly in a critical way, believing that the game shouldn't be played. And he even said, and I quote, "It's created to addict, an addiction to keep you in front of a computer for as long as possible. It's so irresponsible." What response would you give to Prince Harry about the concerns that he's expressed about Fortnite?
We were quite taken aback at Epic by that, really rather surprised because the statements that were made, in our view, couldn't be further from the truth from our intentions and design philosophy and just our multi-decade approach to developing a long-term healthy and sustainable relationship with our audience. It's really always been our effort and intent to create a fun, fair, flexible, engaging, and generous form of interactive entertainment for our audience. And so I feel like a statement that suggests that there was some sort of nefarious attempt to extract short-term profit is a real mischaracterization.
That's interesting. So you clearly feel he got it wrong. So what he said is a lack of understanding, or
I do.
But you'll be familiar with a number of press reports about people complaining about the amount of money that they spend playing Fortnite, that they're encouraged to spend playing Fortnite, particularly the amount of the money that younger people spend playing Fortnite. Do you recognise that for some players there's a real issue here with the amount they're spending playing the game?
Yeah, we have a number of parental controls that are in place, even within the game, for purchasing habits, where we can actually, a parent can go in, enter in PIN information, and control a number of features related to how somebody plays a game. Within that parental control system, we outline the various systems that people can use to control payments, and if that is an issue, they can lock down those features so that payments cannot be processed.
But there was a story in the British press earlier this month about a 6-year-old who was using his uncle's account on PlayStation to play Fortnite. He spent £1,600 in a single day. And these stories are not isolated. What do you do in cases like that? Do you offer refunds to people? Do you accept the fact that maybe someone lost control of the account and money was spent that shouldn't have been spent?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the report. The idea that you could spend £1,600 in a day sounds... I'm not sure that you can actually spend that much in Fortnite.
Well, I've got the report here from the newspaper, so I don't know if you put a complaint into the press standards body if you feel the story's not true.
I can check, but that amount in a single day does not seem correct. But beyond that, we have a player support system that we invest in heavily. That's global, where for these types of situations, people can enter in a ticket either through the game or through our website. And we have basically protocol in place to handle these kind of family fraud situations. And anyone can access that and submit a report, and we address those as we receive them.
But in this case, so this particular case, this is £1,600 spent a day on 15 separate transactions. Do you have? Shouldn't there be features built in that either require some additional verification of the purchaser or challenge someone before spending what would seem to be an excessive amount of money to spend playing a game in a single day?
Yeah, that's where I again would refer back to my comments around payment control systems that we reference in game, where you can go into parental controls, and we clearly and explicitly list the ways that you can control or disable payments from within Fortnite.
So it's down to the user as far as you're concerned. The user's responsibility to make sure those settings are in place.
I would say that we provide tools to allow players to make those decisions for themselves.
But do you think it's responsible that someone could make that level of purchase anyway? I mean, is it responsible to design a game where someone can spend that amount of money without challenge, in a single day, and then to say, well, you should have set the settings differently if you didn't want to do that?
I think it's a little bit of a mischaracterization of how we've actually built the game. Canna mentioned a little bit about this, but we're not interested in maximizing some sort of very short-sighted, short-term profit from our players. We instead want to have a very open and honest relationship that is built to last for years. And the only way to do that is to do that in what is a sustainable way. And that involves us being generous with our offers. That involves us being as transparent as possible about what people are purchasing when they make purchasing decisions in the game. Those are just a couple of the ways.
But when something goes wrong, so if you've got an account like that, or someone's with that account spends £1,600 in a day, and that's out of character with the playing pattern of the account owner, can someone come back to you and say, well, look, this is what happened. I didn't authorise this. It wasn't my intention. A child has done it. Yep. There have been lots of complaints about this before we got relating to Fortnite. You can have the money back.
Yeah, that's where I would say I wasn't aware of this specific report, but any player can submit these types of complaints or concerns through our player support system, and we have family fraud rules in place for just these exact type of situations.
And so you would refund the money in that case?
Yes. Yeah. If they can show us that their child has done this transaction and it wasn't authorized, yeah, it's our intention to be generous in those cases.
So how would they demonstrate that?
I don't oversee the player support system, but I know that we receive those kind of requests regularly, and on very rare occasions, some of those get escalated to higher levels of support or up to legal even. My understanding is that's a really small percentage of those cases, and that the vast majority of them are addressed in the first instance.
Mm-hmm. How would someone demonstrate that it was the child that had made the purchase, not them?
I think you could show the ownership of the credit card that was used to...
yeah, but imagine this case. So this is a card that's been registered to the game. Yeah. A child has gone in and just played the game using the settings that are there and has spent an adult's money without supervision. So in a case like that, how does the card owner demonstrate that it wasn't them who were making the purchase, it was someone else using their card?
In this particular case, they obviously have a history of a significant number of transactions in a very short amount of time. That would basically be the information we'd be looking for in order to issue a refund.
I would presume you would have a different owner of the card in the account, right? So, a parent's name and a child's name in that case, which would further support it. I do acknowledge that it would, in theory, be possible to try and take advantage of our system by claiming a family fraud case where there actually wasn't one. But it's our intention to be generous when those claims arise.
Do you have a cap on how much money people can spend in a day or a week or a month of play?
Yes, we do.
What is that?
It depends on the game mode, but on a particular day and a particular day, basically people are limited in Fortnite Battle Royale to purchasing the Battle Pass or purchasing an item in our daily cosmetic item shop. In the item shop on a given day, we'll have maybe 10 items that might be available, and those will range anywhere from $2 to $20 each. The Battle Pass itself costs $9.50 in order to purchase that.
So what you're saying is there's not necessarily a cap on spend. There's just a limited number of things you can buy in a single day.
Correct.
So that would be about what you said, $210, something like that.
It's probably, if you were to, in the if you were to purchase a battle pass, plus upgrading that battle pass, and all of the items in an item shop, on a given day, you could probably spend around $200.
Yeah.
But again, that's kind of the extreme situation of purchasing a battle pass plus fully upgrading it. Once you've committed to that one-time transaction, you are then limited to what's in the item shop on a given day.
You can't rebuy the battle pass.
What's the average monthly revenue per player for Battle Royale?
Yeah, unfortunately, as a private company, we consider that competitive information that in general we haven't shared and don't feel comfortable sharing.
So, if you give us an idea of what you think the maximum amount someone could spend is, do you think players a regular player who plays, what would you consider to be a regular player of the game? How often would they play?
How often would somebody play in a given month?
Yeah.
It honestly really depends on the player and the way the game has been built. It's built to be played in kind of bite-sized, consumable increments. Each game session itself lasts about 20 minutes, and everything from the way our battle pass is created to the actual just kind of 20-minute duration of the match is meant to be consumable for when you have free time. There's no extended kind of period of grind or, you need to play the game continuously for hours or something like that in order to unlock something. Any kind of progression, challenge, or reward, for something like the Battle Pass, for example, can be completed over the course of 10 weeks. And that was actually a change that we had built into the game based on even player feedback. The original version of the Battle Pass actually would require that within a given week, I shouldn't say require, but within a given week there would be challenges that are available that allow you to more quickly unlock additional cosmetics. We, based on player feedback, actually made it so that these weekly challenges could be completed over the course of the entire 10-week season, so that again players kind of in their own free time can complete these challenges. And again, those challenges are purely optional, and the Battle Pass itself is purely optional. In Fortnite, there's no actual gating of any gameplay or gameplay mode. There's no competitive advantage that you get for purchasing any items, within Battle Royale. And so it makes it a little bit difficult, back to your original question of how many times does somebody play within a month, but with weekly challenges, I think a typical gameplay experience would have somebody jumping in multiple times a week in order to progress and unlock items.
So you mentioned the 20 minutes per game. That's the game time for an individual Battle Royale game, isn't it?
It can be really short if you
get knocked out early. It could be really short.
If you're like me, you're out in a few minutes.
But how many games? So in a session, how many games will people play? Will people play games back to back?
Again, it depends on the player, and it's a wide range. The game is, at this point, so broad, in its appeal and its adoption that it's hard to kind of characterize that.
Yeah, but I imagine as a company, you've probably split your gameplays into different categories, don't you? Those who are registered but barely play, those who play frequently, those who play frequently and purchase frequently. I imagine you've got different categories of players that you analyse, haven't you?
If we were to analyze them, it's probably in terms of players who have left the game, for some amount of time, players who are already kind of frequently playing. And we do try and create various events within the game to pull people back in. And we do this through what we think are just exciting, amazing, entertaining experiences that you cannot find anywhere else.
So pull people back in, that would be you would email them or you would message them on Facebook and you would try and create a hook for them to come back and play. It
depends. Something like our Marshmallow concert was entirely organic. So we had an in-game concert that took place in February. We actually did not promote it on social. The way we promoted it was we actually had a construction crew within the game start assembling a stage over the course of 3 days. Then you saw some concert posters that appeared in the game. Marshmallow himself then went and updated his tour page and put up that he was going to be playing in Pleasant Park inside of the game. And then we had the game, or basically the concert play out from within the game. It's at something like 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. Eastern time. And there was no social post promoting that. There was no
that's great for that one.
Promoting
but I'm sure that's not the only way you do it, though, is it? So you'll have social posts creating, giving people a reason to come back.
That's true.
Probably make some sort of offer or some sort of incentive for people to come back and play.
Honestly, events like that are what bring people back into the game. It's not some sort of...
No, I'm just asking. I mean, so it's not be ashamed of. I'm just asking.
Yeah.
The answer to the question would be yes. So that would have been a perfectly adequate answer.
Great.
You said that you categorise. The company would probably categorise players as to whether they were frequent or lapsed players.
Mm-hmm.
If someone was considered to be a frequent player, how would you define what a frequent player was?
Somebody who's played within the last 2 weeks or 30 days, depending on the metric you're looking at.
Any played at all, any time at all?
Yes.
Yeah, so one game played. And within frequent players, what do you think is the average amount of play time for a frequent player within that 2 week period?
It's hard to characterize frequent. I'm not sure how to even...
Well, you've just characterised. You said any. So if we're looking, if you're saying someone who's played within 2 weeks is considered to be a frequent player.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine there are grades within that too. But
Mm-hmm.
typically, if you were to say, well, how often does a frequent player play?
Again, I'm not sure if frequency is the term that we would use. Has somebody played...
Certainly, I'm just questioning you back to yourself. That's the term you used.
I would once again just refer back to, we look at it in terms of whether somebody's played in the last 2 weeks or 30 days. I'm not aware of any efforts on our side to ensure that somebody for some short duration is spending an extended period of time in the game. That's just not how we build the game.
That's not what I asked you. I just asked you, if someone is a frequent player, how often would they play? Would they play 10 hours a month? Would they play more than that? What would you consider to be normal usage for someone who is not a lapsed player, but someone who is regarded as a frequent player?
Again, I'm having difficulty in kind of pinning down like a single period of time that could qualify as frequent.
Well, I know, I appreciate it. It's within the last few minutes, frequent has gone from 2 weeks to 30 days, but by your own definition. But you said the company would categorise people, and you said one of the ways they would do it is to look at frequent play. And I'll ask you again, what in terms of hours played for a frequent player, what is considered normal for Fortnite? If you consider someone is a frequent player, what would you consider to be a normal amount of time they would play?
A normal amount of time for someone. We have daily challenges, we have weekly challenges. It would be normal for some players to jump in every day to complete daily challenges. For other players, they might only have free time available on the weekend and would jump in and perhaps play for a longer duration to pick up all of their weekly challenges. Some people might have an extended break of a week, from a holiday or school or end of a term session where they might play for an even greater duration. So again, it's in terms of defining just what is a frequent player. It's difficult.
Yeah. See, what I struggle with here is that this is a game which makes money out of people playing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hugely successful game, played by millions of people around the world. And this sort of basic information, and we know from the other games companies we've spoken to, is something that will be gathered and analysed all of the time. So I don't believe that you don't know this information. And to me, it arouses suspicion that this is not something we can discuss, because obviously for our inquiry, this is fairly basic information. We don't need to know your corporate secrets, but get a sense of what people, a normal player, a normal frequent player's engagement with the game, the amount of time they would typically play. Of course it will vary, but I'm sure that you've got an idea of what the answers to those questions are.
I'm sure I'm confident that Epic as a company has the means to track and understand the finer points of player engagement. Neither of us are in the data analytics department who would oversee that kind of effort. And I think more to the point here, at a very fine and specific point like that, we would consider it commercially sensitive. And I would also, as a side note, I would disagree with the statement that Epic makes money from people playing it. The games, the Battle Royale mode is free to play, so people playing it doesn't.
You're not charity, are you?
We aren't.
You're not creating a free-to-play game for the joy of it.
Correct.
You don't make money out of it. I mean, you're nothing wrong with being a commercial entity, but let's not beat around the bush. You make money out of people playing the game. You can challenge that if you like, but that is the reality of the situation.
Well, I mean, sure, we wouldn't have a viable business if no one played and spent money in it, but I wanted to be careful with language about the notion that playing...
You're the general counsel, that's your job, isn't it?
It is. Yes.
Finally for me, Matthew, you're head of marketing,
Mm-hmm.
so presumably you have marketing targets. When you initiate your campaign for people who have stopped being frequent players, you must have metrics for what you expect the return rate to be.
Mm-hmm.
So and presumably you have targets as head of marketing. Your job to try and encourage people to play the game more, visit the game site more often, enjoy some of the benefits that are on offer and that can be purchased.
Yes, but what I'm afraid what the question.
Yeah, so understand that to me would encompass what the head of marketing does. So again, I'm just interested as to again going back to the question I asked earlier about the idea of the number of. I mean, you wouldn't give a figure for the amount people spend, but would you be able to tell us what you would expect the number of purchases someone might make as a frequent player? Drew?
Again, I think we would consider that commercially sensitive information. It's very competitive in the free-to-play space, and this type of information typically isn't shared.
Okay, Joe Stevens.
Carrie and Sean, perhaps I can turn to you and ask you some questions, which I'll now come over to the Epic people. Your business is based on creating engaging games. Obviously, you want people to play them. When you design the games, what thought is given to the psychological well-being of the people that will play them? Do you give that any thought in the design?
I think it's a primary concern in the sense that we design our games to be certainly to be engaging, but to be fun to play, to kind of give that deep, that broad, that rich playing experience. But ultimately, it is about players enjoying our games, and and they have a number of different motivations. Why do players play games? I mean, it can be about achievement. It can be about competition. It can be about competitive kind of relief. It could be about kind of just having fun. It could be about about relieving stress and just being able to kind of get away from things. But ultimately, it has to be a good and a good experience for players.
Mm-hmm. So do you do anything around working out what impact the game might have on psychological well-being when you develop them? Do you employ behavioural psychologists? Do you have any psychological input into the design of the games?
I'm not aware of any of us working with psychologists to when we look at the design of the games.
Carrie?
We don't work with psychologists.
No. Okay, fine. And what sort of player behaviours visible in people who play your games, such as the length of time they play for, the number of games they play each day, the amount of money they spend, would you think would trigger any concern about player well-being?
Again, I guess it goes back to your first question. I mean, we want players to take a healthy and balanced approach to playing games, just like anything else. So
what's healthy and balanced? How would you define that? So what is unhealthy and unbalanced?
I think it's going to vary, depending on the individual and the reason that they're playing. We talk about balance in the sense of, what does that mean in terms of, it's different things to different individuals. I mean, for me personally, it's playing for half an hour to an hour. And my motivation as a casual gamer is just for fun. For some players, and if they're, if you look at FIFA and FIFA Ultimate Team players, they are competitive and they want to continue to improve. And for players, for example, that want to potentially to go into a career in esports, it's what they do. They practice. They'll spend time kind of playing the game. I think it's kind of excessive is about, and it's difficult to characterise. Excessive is about when it ultimately what is out of what it feels out of balance for the individual.
So what's the longest recorded playtime on FIFA, for example?
So we don't actually record playtime. So our game, the FIFA game, has a number of different modes, and each of the modes are built to be enjoyed differently. When we look at how players are playing, I think similar to Epic, we look at have they come into the game recently. So we look at something called session days. So just to be clear, the data we are able to gather through our game when people are playing shows that they've connected to the game. And we can collect things like number of matches played. But we don't actually collect data that shows that there's been ongoing input. So I would know, for instance, that you came into the game today and played 4 matches. I wouldn't know, if you left the game open on your system, I wouldn't know how long you were actually playing. What we can tell you is that the average number of session days for a user of our FIFA game is about 50. So that means they've played 50 times over the year.
What else do you record in terms of player data?
So our telemetry data basically is collecting information on how features are used, how often they're used, whether users are facing frustration in the features. So giving you we have a data analytics team who collect this data and work to analyze it. And their main focus is on looking at how to make a game that people will enjoy playing. And one of the big questions they ask is how hard should a game be to make sure that we're appealing to the broadest group of players possible, because people do like to play in different ways. Some people play a lot, some people play for short times. And so they have this amazing tool. These are really, really smart people who can do amazing things. They have a visualization tool that allows them to collect the data on the usage of a game and put it into a web visualizer so they can see during certain features of the game everybody who's been playing that what's happening. So, for instance, you might be familiar with our Battlefield game. It's a war game. We had a section, a map. People go to different maps of the game to play, and we had one map where folks just kept failing in the game. And so we were able to use the data we collected from the game to visualize what was happening, and we found that a lot of people kept going down this one road in the map and clogging it up and failing. And so through that data, we were able to say, let's change the look of that. Let's add some trees to this road. Let's make some changes so that we don't have thousands of players going down this road and failing at this mode.
Okay. Can I just go back to the FIFA game? I have a particular interest because I have 2 sons and they both play a lot of FIFA. So if you're not measuring the longest, I think I asked you the question about the longest play time that you've had recorded. You don't measure that. Going back to what you said originally at the start of your evidence about health and well-being, if you can't measure excessive play in terms of length of time on your games, how are you addressing the health and well-being of your players?
I don't think even if we could measure the time that we could tell by the amount of time somebody plays whether they're playing in a healthy way or not. There are players who play quite a bit and live normal, happy lives, and gaming is what they do. There are other players who like to jump in and out of the games pretty much like any sport, any activity. Some people probably think I spend too much time reading books, and I know my partner spends too much time playing pool. But he spends that time playing pool because that's what he enjoys doing, and he gets very good at it. It's really not something we could look at and say, well, this person played too many hours and therefore it's unhealthy. Consumers have to have choice, and they also have to have a right of privacy, and we think that's very, very important. Now, what we do agree is that children are special, and we do have a responsibility to create tools and inform parents about those tools to make sure they can make the right choices for their children. And we think, as an industry, we do a very good job at that.
Okay. And you mentioned esports earlier. if I want to be a professional FIFA player on your game, how does that happen? How do you find out that I'm the person that should be in your esports team?
We have so talking specifically about FIFA, so we have a global, we call it competitive gaming, but esports, but a global FIFA, esports series. And it's very much, it's open to all players. It's skill based in terms of being able to kind of qualify and move through that series, that tournament. So, but importantly, it's open to every player. So you'll start kind of at the lowest level in terms of competing kind of locally or kind of in a weekend league, and by kind of winning, being able to kind of progress through the tournament. For us, it's very much about wanting to celebrate and kind of recognise the best players in the world, and those players they want to be recognised. They are motivated to certainly to compete. So
if I enter the tournament and I end up winning it, how long will I have spent playing that game to win it? That's difficult to characterise. I mean, it's why?
It's moving through the tournament, but if you look at the structure of it, I mean, it will run over a year. So there will be going from a local to a regional to a global series. So just playing the tournament.
So you don't have data. You don't keep data on the winner of your tournament, how long they've spent playing the game in order to win the tournament.
No, it goes back to my colleague. I mean, Kerry talked about our telemetry system. It in terms of what it's measuring, it's looking at session days. So it's looking at when the players are opening and then playing that game on a particular day.
Okay. Would somebody in your company be able to identify the 100 biggest customers that you have?
Customers in terms of
players.
In terms of what? Spend or playtime or number of matches?
Playtime or spend or both?
I don't believe with playtime we would, because as I said, we don't measure playtime that way. We would have data on how many matches people played, but again, FIFA is a number of different modes, so it could be that somebody has the highest number of matches in one mode and somebody else has a different number in a different mode. I don't know that if you combine them all that it would necessarily be equivalent.
What about spend? Would you be able to identify your 100 biggest spenders?
We do have spend data.
Yeah. And what do you use that for?
What do we use it for? And
if you collect it, it must be for a purpose.
Well, sure, but when customer service is the biggest thing. So, for instance, if you spent money with us and you had in the same way that Consultant has a global customer support group, we do. And if you spend money with us, or have made purchases from us, we want to have the data on those purchases so we can assist you. So that is probably the number one reason. I think any business has to have records on commerce.
And what would you be assisting me with?
Could be anything. So if you'd like to know, with FIFA, the most regular calls we have are around questions with banning. So people who engage, you may know that with our FIFA game, you are not allowed to sell your coins or your items or anything outside of the game. I would say the largest number of consumer questions that at least get escalated to me on FIFA relate to people who have been banned for violating those rules. So those records are very important to us in helping understand whether someone has complied with the rules.
Okay. How many people a year do you ban on average?
Oh gosh, a lot.
What's a lot? Hundreds, thousands?
Thousands.
Thousands, right. Okay. Fine. Can I turn to you, gentlemen, please? I'm going back to my original question about whether or not you have any psychology input into the design of your games. Do you have any people that do that?
Any psychologists.
Do you think you should?
I don't think we need to. I mean, I think we've done all right.
So how would you reach that? How have you reached that decision that you don't think you need to? What's the thought process behind that?
Well, I guess we'd have to have a purpose in mind for hiring that kind of person. So I guess the implication or my guess as to the underlying import of the question is, might we hire people to better, whose sole job it is to understand the mental state of the end user so that we might get better at delivering game content to them.
Or somebody that's going to help you design a game which will have the hooks that you want to pull people in to play it. So lots of industries do employ behavioural psychologists. So I'm just interested as to why you don't.
That's true. I mean, I think that, I think I started this session saying, it's a deep component of Epic corporate philosophy that as a just across the board design approach, that we're looking to have something that feels fair and generous. We're always trying to stand out in the industry by giving the end user an experience that they view as really generous. And that to me is proven to us to be kind of naturally consistent with a satisfied player base. So we don't feel like we have a huge problem or need for...
So do you employ monetization specialists?
We do not have anybody in the company who is a monetization specialist. What we do have are people, for example, who would be in charge of curating our item shop. So just like any shop, they're in charge of figuring out what items to feature on a given day, which ones maybe haven't been seen in a while, and would focus on just literally kind of stocking that shop.
And as a company, have you done any research into what might be harmful levels of engagement with your games, particularly Fortnite?
Harmful levels of engagement.
Now, have you done any research?
I don't believe. I mean, I think at least from my point of view, is consistent with what Carrie said earlier. We think it's difficult to kind of have a categorical understanding of what healthy engagement is. That varies from person to person, and it varies from time to time, even on a person-by-person basis.
So have you done any research into engagement and length of engagement?
Research kind of, to me, implies
it's a simple
like
question. Do you do research
we've
into
not
the length
commissioned
of time people play
scientists
on
to go
games?
and study it now. Have we spent time thinking about it? Sure.
Right, thank you. And can I ask that same question to you?
Not that I'm aware of, but again, we do obviously spend time thinking about how we can make our games more engaging.
Okay, but you're not aware of any research specifically into harmful levels of engagement?
Oh, no, I'm not. No.
Okay, thank you.
Curious. Mr. Weisinger, in August of 2018, Fortnite reported that they had 78.3 million players. Do you have knowledge of the age profile of the people who play the game?
No, we do not collect any age information from our players. We only collect information that's necessary to run the game as a service, and age information is not required to create and produce Fortnite.
But there are restrictions on age access to certain aspects of the game, is that right?
On certain age
I don't know whether your
aspects,
council might be able to help you on that.
I mean,
Do you know about the Pan-European Game Information System?
Pan-European... Oh, PEGI, yes, of course.
Yes, that's to do with ages.
Yes, so we comply by, basically in any region where we operate the game, we comply by any governing or overseeing authorities that provide age ratings, and we submit information to those, and for PEGI we are rated 12 plus.
So how do you comply if you don't know the age of the players?
There are parental controls in place where you can control access to what games and what content you can have access to. And so by nature of us supporting and participating in these programs, we control access to the game. Separately, though, we have parental controls as well that people can opt into to restrict access.
So if I start to play Fortnite, do I start to play it without you make any inquiry about my age?
Yes, that is correct.
So there's no age verification at all to start with?
No, we don't collect that information.
So I can gain access to Fortnite at any age?
Largely that's done on the... so there's a distinction between delivery mechanism, so...
Sorry, could you say
there's
that
a
again?
distinction between delivery mechanism, or we call them platforms. That's done through... So if you're on PlayStation, you create a PlayStation account, and all of that goes, and the monetization, everything goes through Sony in that case. So they're not directly engaging with us in that case. It is like the same with Apple or Nintendo.
So can I start to play Fortnite without you knowing my age?
In the case of, it's like Sony, for example, if you just have a PlayStation account and you access Fortnite through the PlayStation Store, unless you have an Epic account separately, independent of that you link with a PlayStation account, we know very, very little about you as a PlayStation account holder.
But controls can be set up on these systems to restrict access to those game types.
So, I mean, you said a lot about parental controls. You seem to be shifting responsibility to the parents in your answers.
No, I think instead, I would characterize it as we provide tools and we support tools that allow players to make decisions, and we provide information as such.
My concern is that some of the people who are making decisions in the way that you characterise are children. Is it right that there will be children playing without parents getting involved? That's quite possible, isn't it, from what you've described, from what your colleagues just described?
For a game as mass and broad as Fortnite, there may be players who access systems where controls have not been set up.
I think at least from my point of view, it's important to note that in our view, and I think generally understood, the broad appeal of Fortnite is in part due to being a content that is intentionally designed to be safe and comfortable in a living room environment. So I think the nature of the game itself is one that it means, in my view, shouldn't put it into the same kind of category of discussion as traditionally violent or realistic action games.
Okay. Do you have age verification systems, Kerry and Sean?
So I think I can help even clarify some of what Epic was explaining. So most of our games are enjoyed on consoles, and in the UK in particular, the PlayStation is, I think, incredibly popular. In order for a player to play any of our games online, they first have to have a PlayStation account. You can't make a PlayStation account if you're under 18. A parent has to create an account and has to create a sub-account for a child. So by the time the player is coming to our game, they've already gone through the Sony system. The parent has created a sub-account if they're under 18, and the parent has been informed they can set parental controls to make decisions about the content. Do they want their child to be limited to PEGI 15 and above or PEGI 3 and above? They can make choices as to gameplay, amount of time played, and they can make choices as to purchases. So one of the things we do is we all, as publishers, ensure that our games are compatible with the PlayStation, with the Microsoft systems, so that when the parents have set those child accounts and have made the choices in those systems for their child, we respect them, and what they get in our games follows what they set in the console.
So it's Sony who's responsible for the age verification?
So Sony collects initially, Sony creates the accounts initially, so by the time the player is coming to us, an account has been created for them. In some cases, and for EA, in fact, we also create EA accounts, so we are doing a second check of birth date. Not everybody does that, but the point I was trying to make...
So you do have an age verification system?
So we collect date of birth from our players.
So you ask them how old they are?
We ask them for their date of birth.
So that's when they sign up?
That is when they sign up to get an EA account.
Yeah, okay. And is that for what reason do you do that?
We do that in great part so we can service them.
So is that to sell them stuff?
It's all of the things I talked about before. It's customer service. It's also because we comply with data protection laws.
Yeah.
And so it's important to us to know, who we're dealing with to make sure we're compliant with data protection laws. It's to ensure that we can give our customers personalized service, which is very important to us.
Okay, Mr. Pence, why doesn't Epic do that? Why doesn't Fortnite do that?
As Matt said earlier, it's our intention to collect the minimal amount of player data that we need in order to provide the goods and services that have been requested by that player. So if you've got a player coming in through Sony, all of their account data and information goes through Sony, the purchases go through Sony. So for us, we're really just seeing PlayStation player number 10,000 is engaging with Fortnite in that way. If you're an Epic player, having an Epic account, we don't need any. We need less about you if you're just a free-to-play player and you're not paying any money than we would need if you're buying something in the store. But at a high level, it's our view that we intend to collect the minimal amount, and we don't believe that just from the terms of Epic account servicing, we need age in order to deliver what has been requested by the account holder.
So you don't think it's necessary to comply with data regulation and laws by establishing the age of the people who play your game?
We don't.
Okay. We've had evidence from other social media companies, to be fair to all of the witnesses, who've said there's a really difficult issue concerning age verification, and we understand that, and I think that the industry as a whole, it would be good if we could come up with an age verification system, and I think it's one of the themes that has come through in the evidence that we've received. But I'm surprised that you've given that answer, Mr. Pence, because I think it's important to know the age of players. Can I just ask you what your response is to the concept of the duty of care in the UK government's white paper, in their online harms white paper, the idea that platforms and social media businesses have a duty of care to the people who use the platforms? Kerry, perhaps I'll start with you.
Well, we think the online harms white paper is an important paper, and I'll be staying over tomorrow to meet with DCMS to talk about it further. I think what our view is now is that there's more work to be done on it. It's important to make sure we're able to protect our players, and particularly protect young children. And we think it's a great start. But the online world is very big, and not all mediums are the same. So, for instance, some of the questions you're asking to us as games companies are different from what you might ask to social media companies. We're different products. In social media companies, some of the worries might be that kids are on there sharing photos and videos and lots of personal information. That's not really true for games, because the communications for games tend to be quite restricted and tend to be about furthering gameplay. There's not videos typically shared or things like that. When there's creativity, it tends to be part of what we call the sandbox of the game. So our view is there's some more work to be done, because a one-size-fits-all solution may not work for every company, But we're really grateful to be invited by the DCMS to participate in that and talk about what more we can do, including this really difficult problem of age verification, which I agree is, there's that tension with age verification of data protection and you know, do we collect more data to verify an age, but then we've collected people's personal data. So I think it's a tough question, and we're happy to work with government to try to explore solutions.
So do you agree that you have a duty of care to the people who use your game or games?
So I will say, as a lawyer, I think it's a bit of a loaded question. Are you asking me if under... No, but right now the
I'm
online...
a lawyer too.
Yeah, no, I get it. Right now the online harms white paper is a white paper. If you're asking me if we have a duty of care under law, I can say that there is not a law yet. I do think we have a duty to our game players, and we take that duty, that responsibility very seriously. But legally, I don't feel like this is the place to discuss whether there's a legal requirement. That's why we're participating in the consultation.
Well, we're the House of Commons.
Yes.
This is exactly the place to discuss the issue.
Yeah.
The reason there's a white paper, which is a consultation document, is because we're asking people's opinion about what the law should be. Because we have an obligation to the people that we represent to put in place laws that protect, for example, children.
Right.
So I agree at the moment that there is no duty of care, but there's a proposal from the government that there should be. What I'm asking you is whether you think there should be.
I think the white paper is a good starting point, and it may be that we get to a place where, again, not a one-size-fits-all approach, where there are additional legal obligations for companies. I don't believe the white paper is there yet.
Okay, thank you, Kerry. Mr. Pence, do you think there should be a duty of care for your company to your users?
So I think my views echo Kerry's.
Thought they might.
To me, and you know, I guess forgive me for being a lawyer, should there be a duty?
I forgive you.
Should there be a duty?
That's why I'm asking you the question.
Yeah.
Mr. Weissing is glad that you're doing it.
I appreciate that. It feels like far too broad of a question. Should there be a duty of care? Well, what would the duty imply, right? Like, there could be extreme versions of that I think everyone in the room would say, well, obviously not, right? And then there are already existing obligations that, that aren't really up for discussion because they're already in place. So I think the question is sort of, ought there be something between existing law regulation and some extreme version of walking into someone's house every night and asking them how they're doing?
But you just told me that you didn't think you needed to comply with the legal obligations that are currently in place that are imposed by the Information Commissioner.
I very strongly disagree with that characterization.
Well, the record is there. That's exactly, to my mind, that's exactly what you said. Thank you.
Simon Hart.
Thank you. There seems to be quite a lot of stuff that you don't measure as part of your offer. One of the things you mentioned is, along the way, has been the value of parental controls, which Ian Lucas questioned you about a little bit further. Do you measure the effectiveness and the usage of those? Do you know how many parents actually apply them and how effective they are amongst your players?
I do not have that information with me at the time.
But does it exist?
Yes.
And can you let us have it?
I can discuss and see if that's something that we can provide.
But you don't have any sort of rough recollection of what it might reveal?
I'm sorry, not off the top of my head.
Do you measure the, in any way do you measure the impact of screen time and the sort of mental health impact on any category of your players, young or old?
Not that I'm aware of in terms of screen time, other than, again, going back to our general design philosophy of trying to make a game that is available in consumable pieces that people can play when they have available free time.
And I think you answered an earlier question, so you don't measure spending patterns either. Do you have any sort of matrix by which you are able to define individual spending pattern according to any kind of age group or
No,
you don't do that either?
no.
Well, it's quite difficult from a marketing point of view. And finally on that, and as a consequence of this, you don't, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, measure what the mental health impact on your players might or might not be.
No, but I would say separately that part of the success of Fortnite is listening to our community. It's listening to feedback. It's iterating. You know, I can say certainly from a marketing and a publishing standpoint, one of our most significant even staffing investments is just around community. And we are such a big game as well that when our community doesn't like something, it's pretty loud. And we like to take...
Well, the problem isn't that, it's whether your community likes it too much. I'm talking about an addiction to it, not an aversion to it.
Mm-hmm.
So do you measure that? I mean, earlier on, I got the impression that you didn't completely accept that there might be a mental health consequence for some of your customers. Do you accept that there might be?
I can say that we don't think our game is addictive. I can say that.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, if you just Google "addicted to Fortnite," there are pages of individual case studies and references to addiction. There was the first thing which comes up is a parent's guide to Fortnite addiction. The first article that comes up is parents losing battle with Fortnite as children forced into rehab for video game addiction in the UK as well as in the US. Are they all wrong? Are these people wrong? Are they making this up?
I think the use of the term addiction, unfortunately, separately masks the passion that our players have and the joy that they get from playing our game. And I think personally that it is a mischaracterization of a term like addiction that's typically associated with...
The World Health Organization defined video game addiction they classify it as a disease. So it's not me or this committee saying this. WHO don't reference Fortnite precisely, but they do reference video game addiction as real and therefore worthy of classification. And I'm just listening to the evidence this afternoon. There's an awful lot of things that you don't appear to think necessary to measure, which seems odd from your sort of moral obligations as well as your financial ambitions. And there is, you know, a wealth of evidence, some of which we've heard in this committee and some of which we can read online at any time, which challenges your assertion that actually it's just a whole load of nice people having a good time. And I'm not suggesting it isn't a whole load of people having a good time, but I am suggesting that there is evidence out there which suggests in certain categories of your players there is at least a risk of addictive tendencies, which surely warrants your investment of some of your time and energy to measure precisely what that effect is, or indeed to demonstrate that you may be right and there is nothing, there is no case to answer. And yet all we seem to hear is the fact that there is nothing to see here. You don't think it's necessary to measure it, you don't accept that it exists, and you don't want to spend any money on trying to find out if it does exist.
I don't,
And is that a good place to be?
I don't think that's true in how you, again, characterize that. We actually provide monitoring from within the game. A parent can actually enter in an email address and receive a weekly play usage report from...
But you can't even tell me whether that system works. You said you didn't have the information at the top of your head and you'd have to come back to us.
I know that it
seems
works.
to me to be the most important information that this committee is likely to ask.
I know that it works. I wasn't sure of the participation rate that you referenced.
And what about the other suggestions? What in terms of mental health impacts amongst young people in particular? Is there not a moral obligation to simply satisfy yourself as to the extent of the evidence behind that?
That's why, again, I would refer back to our company philosophy of maintaining a healthy community that is built for the long term.
But how are you doing that? That's my point. How are you doing that? I'm simply asking what steps you're taking to measure that. That's all I'm asking.
By making a game that is easily consumable in chunks, small bites that you can play on your own free time, and that does not force you into any significant short-term investment that might be detrimental to the player. And we are a free game, so we, if anything, are kind of upheld to a higher standard when it comes to the relationship that we have with our players. They have paid nothing to enter the game, and we basically have to build the trust of the player in order to have them continue to play our game and not go elsewhere. So
other witnesses we've spoken to have talked about inserting measures into their games which require you to log off and take a sort of rest period to avoid prolonged periods of sort of screen time. Why didn't you do that?
That's where I believe our preference is to provide the tools where players where parents can monitor playtime through things like our weekly play usage report, and then take advantage of some of these parental controls around screen time and access and purchasing access in order to make decisions based on how they would like either their child to play the game or somebody else who they share an account with.
And it's a different situation than like a kind of a classic MMORPG style where you kind of inherent in the design is some sort of multi-hour campaign sort of mode. The nature of the Battle Royale game is automatically, sort of 1 to 20 minute kind of thing. So it automatically forces the player out of the action. So it's sort of a natural part of it.
So one last question in two parts. Do you believe that there is a legitimate concern that your game in certain circumstances is addictive to both young players and older players? Or do you refute the claims that I read to you from just now?
I think so I know that it's highly compelling and engaging, and then people get really excited about it. And
they get really concerned. They get concerned about it.
Like most things in the world, there is a way to have an unhealthy level of engagement, like even exercise. So I'm sure that there are people who have an unhealthy level of engagement there. So I wouldn't presume to say that a person who feels like someone they care about spends too much time in Fortnite is wrong. I would have to see that on a case by case. But no, I wouldn't say they're wrong about what they state.
And therefore, are you satisfied that Fortnite doesn't have any mental health consequences for any of your players in any category of their age?
So I think as a company, we really care about our player base, and we care about our relationship with them, and we care about our reputation as a company. And that's not a thing we just do in isolation. We listen to our audience, and we listen to the public, and we think about it and try and iterate and innovate and continue to develop our games and process. So it's not a thing, it's a thing that we're happy and willing to have ongoing dialogue about. It's not we don't have a sort of static position on that exactly. I do think it's unfair to put a game company which has a very limited relationship with the end user, a pretty clearly defined limited relationship, to ask them to comment on the mental health of an individual player. Right? That ought to be the domain of a medical professional.
But if you were launching a physical product, a toy for a child,
sure,
you would be required by law to ensure that there were no physical or emotional consequences. You would be required by law. That would be your responsibility, not some medic down the line. So what's different about your product?
I guess I don't oversee the development of physical toys, so I wouldn't be able to know the extent to which we would have an obligation to the emotional health of the buyers of those toys.
Okay. I mean, do you, Mr. Pence, do you accept the World Health Organization's definition of gaming disorder? Do you accept the definition they've given it?
I mean, I understand that has happened. I'm not an expert on that process. We do participate in industry organizations which have taken issue with the manner and process that has gone through, and I also understand that there's plenty of debate over whether that process was proper. I wish that I knew a lot more about it. I believe you think they're wrong? The World Health Organization have run a flawed process and come out with a flawed result. My understanding, and I'm not in a position to speak with a much position of knowledge on it, but I
find that incredible. As the general counsel of your company, that you're not in a position to speak about it, I find extraordinary.
Okay, but we rely on our trade organizations to do that.
Well, you shouldn't. You should have responsibility for your own company and your own customers. It's not what the trade body's there for. They maybe lobby for you, but you're the one that has responsibility. These are your users and it's your company.
I think that's a little unfair.
Well, I don't.
Okay.
So the gaming, they define gaming disorder, the World Health Organization, as impaired control over gaming and the continuation or escalation of gaming despite occurrence of negative consequences. So it's an addiction, in the sense that it's something people feel compelled to do even though it's hurting them. That's the definition there. I'm not aware of a definition of the World Health Organization defining excessive reading or excessive exercise in the same way as a form of addiction. So, I mean, it seems to me you could disregard what the World Health Organization has said. It seems to me that's your position. But again, I think going back to what other members were asking about duty of care, would it not be responsible of a company to actually consider the guidance given by the World Health Organization, and therefore consider whether they have a duty of care to their users, to consider whether some of those users may fall into this definition of being victims of a gaming disorder? Do you think that would be the action of a responsible company to do that?
So I think, I guess to clarify my earlier comment, my understanding of the World Health Organization sort of findings and process is that their audience is the global medical industry rather than individual companies. But in a broader sense, I do think that companies, good companies, will care about their customers. So in the abstract sense, if we're talking about a non-legal sense, yeah, I think we should care.
Okay, so how does your company care about the potential for your users to be suffering from a gaming disorder?
So I think in the ways that Matt and I have talked about earlier, from a design philosophy and approach.
Yeah, sorry, your design philosophy is about improving the play of the game. I've not heard anyone say anything other than saying that the design process is about making the game more enjoyable for users and designing a game they want to play. And that's a perfectly legitimate thing for a games company to want to do. I've not heard anyone so far say anything about that context of looking at the gameplay in terms of duty of care.
My answer to that is we as a company always try to resist the temptation to maximize short-term benefit. And in my view, that's where the cases in which players are most likely to develop.
Yeah, I'd say we're drifting back to the gameplay experience. Actually, what you're talking about is designing the game in a way that encourages people to play it. And it doesn't put people off playing. What I'm talking about is a care, which you said earlier, a responsible company would exercise to identifying players who may be potentially suffering from a gaming disorder because they're playing the game excessively in a way that is not good, is not part of their enjoyment, but is become a compulsion they can't control. And I've not heard anything that suggests that your company believes that is something you have a responsibility to monitor.
I think I understand better what you mean now. So to say, I think this person is probably playing too much.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? I think that's a difficult one because I don't know how to define too much for reasons that we talked about earlier. So, how much is too much for following football matches, or
Yeah, but following football matches isn't a disorder under the World Health Organization. Reading books isn't a disorder under the World Health Organization. Gaming is.
I don't think it's fair to say that gaming is a disorder under the World Health Organization.
Okay, so that's what they say, and you refuse. They've classified it as such.
It is not my understanding that they have classified gaming as a disorder.
I mean, UKI, the trade body who are represented sitting behind you, mentioned they've said that the industry should pause and reflect and consider what the World Health Organization has said. It sounds like you've paused, considered, reflected, and disregarded what they've said. But the answer to the question is really very simple: is you don't do it. Despite the fact the company obviously generates weekly player usage reports so that it can send them to parents who request them. The company gathers data about gameplay of all the players. You don't believe you've got any obligation at all to identify what might be excessive amount of gameplay that might fall under the categorisation the World Health Organization have given to gaming disorder. Ultimately, there is no intervention the company would make against someone who appears to be playing for increasingly excessive periods. It's just not data that you gather and use in that way. Well, you gather it, you just don't use it in that way.
I think, yeah, our position or our current approach is to resist designing a game that encourages people to play it or engage in an unhealthy way, to provide tools and reporting for
but
parents.
What if they're doing it anyway? That's the point, isn't it? If you're in the drinks industry, you say we don't encourage people to become alcoholics, but nevertheless some people do. And actually, there's a whole raft of duty of care practices the drinks companies have adopted to try and protect vulnerable consumers, even though most consumers consume responsibly. But I don't see any evidence of you doing that, doing something similar.
That's fair. We don't currently try to. We don't have a mechanism in place that automatically sets limits on that. That's fair.
But I didn't mention setting limits. I said actually monitoring. You clearly, from what you said, in answer to other questions, the company gathers data about usage.
Yes.
So it'd be quite easy to identify people that were playing over a set amount of time. But, I think it's interesting to us because there are lots of reports. I mean, my colleague Simon Hart has read things out from a quick Google search. We've quoted newspaper articles. I quoted what Prince Harry thought. We've quoted what the WHO thinks. And your response to all of it is that basically all these people are wrong, and you're right, and there's not a problem, and you're so confident there's not a problem, you don't even monitor it.
I believe I said I wouldn't presume to say any of those people are wrong, and I.
But the record will show what you said about what Prince Harry said at the beginning, which is pretty close to saying you thought he was wrong.
That's fair. When I was referring to Mr. Hart's reference to self-reported family problems or concerns, I wouldn't presume to say those are wrong.
I would say if I was a parent who was concerned about my child's use of Fortnite, I think listening to your testimony would not give me any encouragement at all that this was an issue that you cared about.
So I think we do care about it, and I would actively encourage those concerned parents to use the tools and measures that we have in place.
So it's the parent's responsibility, it's not yours. You don't have responsibility, it's up to the parents to set the controls.
I don't think it is our primary responsibility to determine how much individual players should play Fortnite.
Mm. Well, I think this is where going back to the questions about the online harms or the concept of duty of care, I think this is one area where we may all end up disagreeing. And I think we think that major platforms making very large amounts of money for millions of people should have some sort of duty of care of the way people use their product. Brendan O'Hara.
You may not believe you may not have a legal duty of care. I think you'd agree that a company like yourselves should have a code of ethics. And we've heard a lot of evidence in this committee from Dr. David Zendel, among others, that loot boxes are closely linked to problem gambling, particularly among adolescents. Can I ask you, both companies, do you consider loot boxes to be an ethical feature of your games? Kerry?
Well, first, we don't call them loot boxes. I think that was
whatever term you wish to apply to them. Do you consider them ethical?
So what we look at as surprise mechanics, but I think it's important to look at this. So if you go to a I don't know what your version of Target is, but a store that sells a lot of toys, and you do a search for surprise toys, what you'll find is that this is something people enjoy. They enjoy surprises. And so it's something that's been part of toys for years, whether it's Kinder Eggs or Hatchimals or LOL Surprise. We do think the way that we have implemented these kind of mechanics, and FIFA, of course, is our big one, our FIFA Ultimate Team and our packs, is actually quite ethical and quite fun, enjoyable to people. We agree with the UK Gambling Commission, the Australian Gambling Commission, and many other gambling commissions that they aren't gambling. And we also disagree that there's evidence that shows it leads to gambling. Instead, we think it's like many other products that people enjoy in a very healthy way, and like the element of surprise.
Okay, so just to be absolutely clear, your loot boxes or surprise mechanics, you have no ethical qualms whatsoever with?
So I think you're recharacterizing my language. What I said is I think the way we've implemented our FIFA Ultimate Team packs is ethical.
Okay, other than FIFA and other games that you provide, are you equally comfortable and relaxed about?
For all of the games we have on the market that have a randomized content mechanic, a surprise mechanic, a loot box, I have no qualms that they are implemented in an unethical way.
Okay, I'll ask your question, but let me follow up on that. Holland and Belgium, or the Netherlands and Belgium, have classified these surprise mechanics as gambling, haven't they?
Belgium and Netherlands have taken a different view from every other gambling commission in the world.
Okay, why then would two of our European neighbours take that view?
They have different gambling laws, and in fact, I'm not sure how familiar you are with their views, but their views as to why these mechanics violate their laws are different. They're not the same view. They both have a very different interpretation, and they have a different law. And they decided, the regulator, not the courts, decided that under their local law, these mechanics under certain circumstances violate the law.
And it was violating the law because it was a player was able to cash out in-game items for real-world value. Is that right?
Would you like me to get into the interpretation? The Belgian, no, that was not their view. Their view was that any loot box mechanic, any randomized content mechanic, if you paid for it, automatically violated the law. It didn't matter if there was external game sale. The Dutch take a very different view, and they say both paid and unpaid loot box mechanics violate the law, but only if they can be traded. So there what you're seeing is regulators making an interpretation under the local law that's quite different than what every other regulator in the European Federation of Gambling Regulators have decided.
And sorry, just for the record on this, you said they were different interpretation. Both regulators interpreted loot boxes as giving games a chance in the context of FIFA 18.
They did, but for different reasons under different laws.
Sorry, Brendan.
Okay. And so those mechanics are still available in the UK, is that right?
Both mechanics.
Yeah. And is there any evidence of players re-registering to play in other jurisdictions? So UK players or players from other European countries registering to play in Belgium or Holland where these things don't apply?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Okay. Is there any evidence of game players registering from outside Holland or Belgium to play from Holland and Belgium to avoid the loot box?
Well, in the Netherlands, we still, all of our mechanics are still available in the Netherlands. So the only change we've made is that we no longer sell FIFA points in Belgium because that is the virtual currency used to purchase with money our FIFA packs. So in Belgium, after discussions with the government and the regulator, we made a business decision to turn off the sale of points in Belgium. That's the only change we've made. I have no evidence that anybody has re-registered in a different country to avoid that, no. And because it's around purchase, I think it would be difficult because it's a purchase. So you have a country that you're located in that your credit card is attached to, right?
Okay. So should we take it then that the response of your company would be that a government would have to make a ruling and legislate against something before you will take action?
I think that's a really broad mischaracterization. So, we had 2 regulators in 2 countries who, under their local laws, had an interpretation of the law. One, we ultimately decided to make a change in our game for business reasons. The other, we are still in discussions both directly and with the industry because we disagree with the interpretation the regulator has made. There is a law. Neither of these laws have been tested by the court, or the interpretations have not been tested by the court. But I don't know if that answers your question.
I'm not sure that it does, but could I move on? We'll probably come back to
for
that.
Sure.
But the initial question about the ethics of, I don't know what you call them, let's call them loot boxes, let's call them surprise mechanics. Do you have ethical qualms? Do you think they're an ethical feature of the game?
I personally do not have ethical qualms with that, but Fortnite also does not have those kind of surprise packs or loot crate mechanics. All of our cosmetic purchases show what you're purchasing up front, and it's a pretty open transaction for those types of in-game items.
Are you comfortable with the ability to resell in-game purchases in the real world? Is that something you encourage, or is it something you discourage, or you don't take a view on?
It's absolutely prohibited. It's prohibited by our terms. We have technical measures in the game to stop it. As I mentioned earlier, we ban thousands of people every year who give us... Well, people also break into government data, and we don't want that to happen. What I'm telling you is we put every lock and protection in place to make sure it doesn't happen. There's no incentive for it to happen. It's bad for us. It's bad for our players. I personally have supported both the UK Gambling Commission and the FBI in going after people who do this. So we take it very seriously.
So realistically then, what have you done to prevent it happening other than banning people?
I can't tell you all the technical measures we have in our game because that would give the bad guys some information that they would love to use to exploit. But as I said, I worked for 3 years on a case with the FBI to stop this from happening, and several people went to jail. We take it very, very seriously. We have a 24/7 security staff who's monitoring activity to be sure that people aren't engaging in this type of behavior in our game.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Clive.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Penson, Mr. Weissing, I found your answers very evasive. Were you coached before you came here on how to answer questions? No, you didn't pay any external advisor to advise you on how to answer questions here today?
We did after our I don't know what you call it, prep call with your committee, we did seek English counsel advice.
It shows
on the ICO white paper.
So I've got just a number of questions. Can I just ask you, is it possible to disable text messaging on Fortnite?
Do you mean in-game chat?
No, text messaging. So in-game chat you can, but text messaging, is that possible to close that down?
It's not possible to text message from within Fortnite. You can in-game chat and send. You can send a.
Not SMS.
Yes,
yeah,
correct. Not a mobile text message.
There are two
send.
forms, as I understand it. You correct me if I'm wrong. You can either in-game chat verbally,
correct,
or you can write to one another. However
correct.
you want to describe it, you can.
Sure, voice chat.
Can you
or
switch
text
the latter off?
Correct. Yes.
You can.
Uh-huh.
So because the information that I've had is that you can switch off the in-game chat, but you can't switch off the written form, and that's been a concern for some enforcement agencies in terms of protecting children from being groomed online. Is that anything that you're aware of?
As part of our parental controls, you can control what access any player has, whether it's text or voice chat, as
They
well
can
as
both be switched off.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Mhm.
Right. And so there's also an article in Business Insider about the what was described as a brutal work culture in your organisation, with people being forced to work up to 100 hours a week. Have you got any response to that?
I don't know. I'm aware of the article. I'm not aware of anybody who's been forced to work. I do know that Fortnite became this global phenomenon at a relatively small company at the time, and that for many people like myself, recognized just what a tremendous kind of once-in-a-generation experience this was, and wanted to see it fulfill the ultimate level of success as much as it could. And so people like myself and Canon worked really hard to make sure that the game met its full potential.
I'm sure you did. I mean, I commend you for your hard work, but it's the people who have no choice whether to work or not that the article was referring to. You're not aware of Mr. Pence. Is this something that you would respond to if it was a calumny?
Yeah, I do. I'm aware of the article, and we did actively respond to the article.
And you refute it's not accurate?
Yeah, certainly. This is not some sweatshop where people are, some managers are standing behind people with weapons, forcing people to work. Absolutely not. As Matt said, it took everyone by surprise, and obviously there's an enormous amount of hard work associated with that, and everybody did their part. And we recognize that we really need to take active measures to make sure that we have a healthy and sustainable workplace. So we are working on that, and we continue to do so. But no, I would not. It's absolutely not true that anyone is or has ever been forced to do a 100-hour work week.
Okay, because I'm giving you the opportunity to refute that on the basis that it would obviously lead to questions. If you treat your workforce like that, what would you do to your customers? But you've answered that. So when you create a job, a game, when you create a game, what is the mindset? How do you go about deciding this will work, this won't? Is it just hit and miss?
For us, for Epic, it can come from any one of a number of sources. Fortnite, I believe, way back in the day, arose out of what we would call a game jam, where developers are given free time to construct whatever project they want, and they kind of played around with this building mechanic that you could build a fort within a world, and it seemed really fun. And 5 years later, we had Fortnite.
Just like that?
That was it. I mean, there was a lot of iteration in that process. There was a lot of changes to the way the world was built, and even the first iteration of Fortnite as kind of a PvE, so players versus AI enemies, was just the first mode of Fortnite to release. Separately, we had a small team who experimented with making a battle royale mode within Fortnite. I believe there was something, believe it or not, it was about 8 weeks of them developing that.
So this is just interacting with people online and altering the game and making it more attractive?
A little bit. I mean, Fortnite existed in a kind of an early access beta phase for a long time, so players were able to jump in before the release of the game without paying for anything and actually get to play around with the mode. And then we would solicit feedback, we'd tweak things, we would take the game back down for an extended period of time, rework some major systems and put it back up, let people play. We would solicit feedback, and again, like Epic's very iterative in that sense. We want to get the game out as fast as we can to the players so that we can get feedback.
Right. So if I were a drug company developing a drug that may potentially do harm, I wouldn't be allowed to develop it like that. I wouldn't be able to put it out there in the marketplace and see how people reacted to it, and then decide whether it was a good thing or not, without anyone questioning my motives and what I was doing. Why should we allow that to happen in gaming?
I don't know if that's an apples-to-apples comparison. It's just, games, demos, small gameplay experiences where a product is developed in tandem with the community. I feel like that's actually something that exists for a lot of professions of understanding what the player likes or what the customer likes, taking that feedback and making a better product.
Yeah, but I mean, there may be people at the other end who like, but are doing it's doing them harm. And you have said in your evidence today that you haven't even bothered to check whether there is any potential harm. You don't employ anybody to investigate that or to determine whether there's potential people becoming who have the characteristics, personal characteristics, that they would become addicted to your game and spend more money than you don't care about that.
Well, that's why, when we are in those kind of beta access phases, we're not charging anybody to play that experience. It's, hey, come try this, game out, and we'd love to hear your feedback.
So, I heard your answers to the questions earlier on about age profiling. You don't take check any age of anybody who signs up for your game at all.
Correct.
So, how would you be satisfied that a child has not signed up secretly to play Fortnite? How would you satisfy yourself that you're taking proper care to prevent that from happening?
That's where, by participating in things like age ratings boards and councils and utilizing the parental controls that exist on these systems.
Yeah, I heard that about parental controls earlier on. But so if a 15-year-old boy turns up at or a 15-year-old, you could be a girl for that matter, and turns up at a casino and tries to walk in or a betting shop, is it the responsibility of the parents to stop that child going into that betting shop, or is it the owner of the betting shop? I mean, do you take... Well, you are allowing these children to have access without checking their age before they can access your game. You seem to be taking no responsibility and no duty of care at all.
So, as I mentioned earlier, and Carrie did a much better job than me, if you're accessing... So if you're a PlayStation user, all of that transaction goes through PlayStation, so they own the relationship with the end user. It's the same with Nintendo, it's the same with Apple, it's the same with Xbox. So we don't own that account. We don't own that payment.
I get that.
Does that make sense?
But I disagree with you. You don't think you have any duty of care there at all. You think that should be passed on and that you can just absolve yourself of any responsibility. So there are no traits of players that in game when they play that would give you any indication of age or anything like that. There's no data that you collect of any sort.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so do you recognise the term addictive play mechanics?
I feel like I can deduce what it means.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if it's an actual term that's used for some sort of condition or something.
Yeah, so you wouldn't recognise it as something that would be inbuilt into a game to induce players to play longer hours, to make in-game purchases, and that those mechanics are inbuilt into the games, and that's how basically you monetise players.
I'm not aware of any system or thing like that. I mean,
just all happens by chance.
I know that we would look at things like points of frustration, issues like balance. If an item seemed like it was too overpowered and it was causing frustration for people playing in a particular mode, that we would use that information to optimize it so that it's more fun. But that's the kind of things that we're looking at.
I think I'm confident, and I think I've probably seen it. There are ways to design games in order to solicit maximum sort of short-term benefit for the company, right? So you may be referring to things like, oh, you're almost there, just pay another $1 and then you can cross the finish line. So that may be the kind of thing you're talking about.
Well, I can list it for you, actually. It says, encourage frequent logins, get users to spend more time on the device, distract the user from everyday and real-world activities, encourage deeper involvement through sign-ups, etc., make users feel as though they are missing out when they are not online, and upsell the user to spend more time and money on the app. You don't recognise any of those things as part of something that would be on that you do on in your games?
I don't think that's a fair statement. Certainly, we don't have it. This is not a $60 or £60 price of entry game, right? So if we don't have an audience, then we don't have a viable product. So we have to have a product that is attractive to our customers, that has things that they want, and that has things that they want next week to come back to. So certainly we have to design it in a way that gives them things that are entertaining that they want more of.
Okay, well, can I just move on to prompts? Do you prompt players if they've not been online?
We used to have for mobile like an SMS push, so you would receive a push, or it actually was an SMS. There was a push notification that would go out. I believe if you hadn't jumped in 3 days or something. There were a few more since then. That system has been disabled, mostly for technical reasons. I don't think we're against the concept of having push notifications, but that's the only kind of, I guess, out-of-game message that we would have on an actual platform.
We advertise the game. So.
Yes, so
if somebody's not been online for however long, they wouldn't receive an email or a text message or any other message.
So we do send kind of CRM email blasts that would go out to players, potentially notifying them about a new event that's happening in the game. That is.
And that's the general thing. That's not targeted at somebody who's just not played for a week or 2 weeks or whatever.
We might do it if somebody has not played for some amount of time. We might, for example, talk about a new mode that's available that we think is more interesting to somebody who may have left the game and just didn't like the Battle Royale experience. So, for example, we had our Avengers event is a good example of something that we think people might be interested in. The Avengers, they may have stopped having an interest in Fortnite, and so they might want to play the Avengers mode within Fortnite. We would put out a message like that.
So what prompts that then? How what are you looking at that would say, well, this guy's stop playing Fortnite, wants to play something else?
Honestly,
so what data have you got that tells you to do that?
I wish it was more scientific, I suppose. I wish I could provide some sort of answer.
You make any money at all?
But no, we basically look at events that are happening within the game that we think might be of interest, and we kind of manually queue those up, and we send it out to players because we think it would be of interest and that it's new and it's different. There's not some weird automated algorithm that's going in and trying to figure out based on your play pattern, here's the specific message that would be optimized for you.
Okay, so I wrote something down that you said earlier on when you talked about pulling people back in. So what do you do to pull people back in, and what tells you they need pulling back in?
That would be, again, somebody who hasn't played in maybe 2 weeks or a month. We might send them a message like related to a big Avengers event or to the fact that we're starting a new season.
Okay, am I getting that wrong? Because I thought you just said you didn't do that. I thought you just told me, I asked specifically, did you send messages when people hadn't played for a period of time? And you said, no, you didn't. Now you're telling me to pull people back in when they haven't played for a while, you send them a message.
I'm not sure if I did, but I would like to correct that. I mean, we certainly do send a message that if somebody hasn't played in a while.
I think in fairness, Mr. Wessinger, I think he did say that actually. So, yeah.
Right, okay, well, I thought you didn't, but never mind. Okay. But so can I just move on to electronic arts? how is it possible that people can take these FUT points and sell them for money? What if I was to buy them? What would I be able to do with them that means that they're worth me buying?
Okay, so it's not the FUT points, they're FIFA points, and that is a premium virtual currency that you would purchase. Those, there's no market for FIFA points. There's something called foot coins. Those are earned coins. You can't buy them. You earn them in the game. There are, for every commercially successful product in the world, there are bad guys who want to make money from it. So what we have are hackers and thieves and criminals who find ways to exploit the system. That may be through credit card purchases. It may be through fraudulent credit card purchases. It may be through what they call gold farming, rooms of people in Asia who are playing the game over and over and over to earn. It may be hackers who learn how to get into the system and exploit it. But what they do is they get an inventory of coins, and those are the earned virtual currency again. You can't take them out of the game. So other bad guys set up a website outside the game, and they collect your money, and they say, meet me back in the game, and I'm going to give you these coins within the game, and they set up a mechanism to exchange within the game. So that's how it works.
Right. And so is there anything that you could do to close that down, to make it not possible for those people to get back into the game and do that?
We do a lot.
Okay.
And we have a whole team who works on this, and I have my own team in legal who works on this. But I mean, you know this from reading the news. Bad guys find ways to do bad things. They just do.
Right. And your random content mechanics, as I understand it, that people don't know what they're going to get. They get a random set of players, and you know, so it is a form of chance, is it not?
Well, they have some information on what they get. So like I said, there's an element of surprise for sure. But before you acquire a pack, whether you earn it or you buy it, and just to be clear, 85% of the packs that are awarded in FIFA are earned. You know generally how many items are in there. You know how many player items will be over a certain rating. You may not know exactly which players you're getting or exactly which items you're getting. And that's the element of surprise.
There is a division. Do members wish to?
I think we've got to go over.
Well, I think it's a sorry, it's a free vote. So it's on restoration.
I was going to go and vote. But
okay,
yeah?
We can suspend the sitting for the votes, but it's a free vote. But,
oh no, it is.
Okay.
The proceeding is currently suspended. 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 The proceeding is currently suspended.
Thank you. I'd like to call the committee back to order following the division in the House of Commons. I'm not expecting any further interruptions, but if I could ask Clive Efford to conclude his questioning.
Very quickly, Chair. So I was just asking the EA about the issue of the FIFA points. Just to clarify, how do you? What is the benefit that you determine it comes from providing FIFA points that can be monetised? Why, if there's so much of a problem for the game, you have to put in so many efforts to try and stop people acting fraudulently. What is it that you think they add to the game that you feel that they are worth the while? If you feel that there's such a problem.
Do you mean foot coins? You mean the earned coins?
Well, the fact that FIFA points can be turned into the FUT coin that can then be monetised. If this is such a great problem that you've got to work with the FBI and you've got to work so hard to stop it re-entering your games where people can monetise it there, is it worth all that problem? What is it about it that you feel it's an important part of the game?
It's really, from a player's perspective, is that ability to then get the pack, so those bundles of items for players, kit, etc. in the game. It's one of the most important features to them. It's when you look at what Ultimate Team is, it's about being able to build your best virtual team, and so the ability to do that is about being able to earn those foot coins to do that. So, taking that mechanic out essentially prevents one of the most appealing things for players about the game is I want to have my perfect team that I can then play against, another my best friend against another competitor. So it's a key feature of the game that players enjoy, and it's been the driver from a perspective. If you look at FIFA Ultimate Team we've had in the game for over 10 years, and it's continued to increase in popularity. But it's about that ability to build your team.
Right, but if I've got all the best players in the world in my team, doesn't mean I'm going to win.
No, it doesn't. No.
It's player ability, is it not?
But I think that's absolutely true. But the packs, the surprise, we talked about this a little bit before. That's fun for people. They enjoy it. They like earning the packs, opening the packs, building the teams, trading the teams. The thing about FIFA Ultimate Team is it's not any one of those things, whether it's the points or the coins or the packs or the items or the trading market or building your team. It's an integrated, really well-designed mode in a game that we launched 11 years ago and is, I would guess, arguably one of the most popular game modes in the world. All those pieces go together. They're very balanced and they go together, and players love playing them. And because it's so popular, because it's so commercially successful, that's why we're a target for the bad guys.
Right. The last the issue is, do you send prompts if players don't participate in the game?
We use, so similar to the Epic guys talked about, we have marketing messages that we will send to players who have opted in to receive those messages, to communicate to them about there are some great new features or new modes in the game or key events, and there is part of that is about come back and play.
And is that also come back and you can purchase?
It's about come back and play the game.
And do you send those prompts to? Do you have an age limit on who you would send those prompts to?
We would comply with the legislation, the regulation. So again, players have to opt in to receive those communications.
And what data do you collect in order to determine when somebody should be prompted?
I don't know, so neither of us are the marketing expert. I don't know whether we serve up marketing messages to to different groups of people.
I think if you think about, we all receive or we all sign up for things. We have the ability, obviously, to opt in or opt out of those, of receiving marketing communications or marketing emails.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you. Charles Watling.
Yes, as we're getting late in the afternoon and most of my questions have already been covered in so many ways, I shall be mercifully brief. But thank you for being here today. But I'd just like to ask you, there was a time when to get a video game you bought a CD-ROM, you took it home and you'd play pretty much on your own for as many hours as that game would last. Now we have open-ended gaming, we have the issues that we've established quite clearly of addiction. We had a young man before us on this committee who was an undergraduate and managed to play 32 hours straight. And my colleague Simon Hart just brought up an issue of a young girl of 9 years old who, whilst playing Fortnite, refused to leave the game and as a result wet herself. So there are issues of addiction. I just want to ask you, all of you, as a result of today and other issues that you might come across in the near future, clearly the games industry has developed massively since those days of the CD-ROM, and clearly regulation behind the curve, and I would argue that corporations are behind the curve of what they're developing. In a sense, it might be fair to say you're creating a fun game and everything, but inadvertently along the way you're creating a monster. So are you in future going to take corporate responsibility over care of duty? Will you look at that? Will you come back so you won't have any more awkward sessions like perhaps today has been to a certain extent, so that in the future we can safeguard the vulnerable in our societies? I'll ask the guys from Epic first.
I certainly acknowledge that there's certainly more that the industry can do, and we ourselves, just on the Epic side, do and have made improvements there, and I anticipate continuing to do so, both for ourselves and in participation with industry groups like ESA in the United States or UKI here, etc.
So you might be brought to a place where you will make a commitment to institute a care of duty for the vulnerable people who might be sitting at their consoles for far too long.
So, I as any lawyer ought, I have to understand what I'm signing up to before I sign up to it. But certainly I can say that we as a company definitely care, and we do anticipate continuing to make improvements for ourselves and on behalf of the industry. And I do acknowledge that we have room to grow there. I wouldn't presume to say that you wouldn't be able to come up with more questions for us in the future, but it's certainly our hope to continue to make improvements there.
I wasn't expecting a commitment, I was expecting the answer from a lawyer, but thank you, that was very good. Yes, on EA.
I'll try not to give you a lawyer's answer, and I haven't found today at all awkward, so hopefully you haven't either. So first of all, I don't think we can agree to say that games are addictive, and I actually don't believe the World Health Organization decision to designate a gaming disorder uses the word addiction or refers to games as being addictive. I also think that medical...
Sorry, may I interrupt at that point, but would you not agree? I mean, we've looked at platforms like Facebook and Twitter, and it's been established that there is an addictive spiral there. And that has been established beyond that.
I mean, I want the definition here. I mean, they say that it constitutes continuation or escalation of gaming despite the occurrence of negative consequences, which it doesn't use the word addiction, but that is a definition of what addiction is.
Yeah. Sure, but what it doesn't say is that games are inherently addictive. What it says is some people suffer from a disorder. And the World Health Organization put out a video and said, what we're not saying is that people who play a long time, play a lot of hours, are addicted or have this disorder. They said it's something a doctor would need to diagnose. They said it's far more than playing a lot. So I think it's a very new designation and one that the industry does have responsibility to follow. And I think now that it is a designation, more medical practitioners, the scientific community will be weighing in on it. And it's something we do have to follow, absolutely. I would also say that as an industry, and so that you have my background, I started in this industry before the first PlayStation launched. I've been around when we used to sell discs. My job used to be anti-piracy when we had that kind of thing happen.
Back to the cassette days.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a changing industry, and we're trying to change with it, and we are a responsible industry. The parental controls we offer, I know it feels a little bit like we're giving you an excuse or saying we're not responsible. Those are tough to build. We care about them, and one of the other things we are really committed to doing as an industry is getting out there with information about healthy gaming. So we've launched already this year 2 campaigns in Europe. We're working in the UK to launch another one that's really focused on making sure all players understand what healthy gaming is, but parents in particular understand what tools are available to them.
But the question I was asking you specifically was, were you as an industry going to take responsibility rather than passing on to parents and the gamers themselves? Because the point's been raised absolutely about alcohol use, etc., around these tables today. And are you as an industry going to take responsibility in the future?
I would tell you that Electronic Arts already is a very responsible company. We make games that we put out that are purposefully made to enjoy in a healthy way. We work closely with our industry colleagues to provide tools, to provide information. We aren't able to go out and diagnose individuals. We aren't able to go into their home and tell them how to play.
Now, arguably, you are able to see how long people are sitting at their consoles watching your game. And if you can see somebody playing your game for sort of 10 hours at a straight stretch, this has got to be unhealthy.
I mean this in a very respectful way. But why can I say that? How can I say that? Has a doctor said that playing for 10 hours straight is unhealthy?
No, I'd say arguably it would be. So I'm asking you to take responsibility and look at it.
So I think that we will be, we have been working with World Health Organization. We will be watching this closely, and we'll be doing everything we can to make sure we're responsible to our players.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just ask, just sort of pick up on a couple of points that have been raised over the last couple of rounds of questioning. Firstly, towards Epic, do you moderate content of chat forums on the game?
We have some tools in place that will automatically filter out bad words, offensive words, that will kind of asterisk that out so that you can't see that kind of language. And then on top of that, we have just a separate chat moderation tools that you can just disable it. So
chat reporting or
and then yes, separately
player communication reporting.
Correct. Separately, then in addition to kind of the language filtering, plus the ability to kind of toggle actually seeing those messages, you can then report through our in-game systems if you see anything that's offensive or abusive.
Also, you mentioned forums, and for actual like web forums, those would be actively monitored, like with active human monitors, like moderators.
From the forum administrator?
Well, I mean, I think there's multiple tiers there, but basically humans that oversee the forum. I mean, the web forum posts.
Humans that work for you?
Work for or are kind of designated community members. So both.
So people that play the game, moderating the content of other people?
Well, I think it's common on web forums for kind of trusted individuals to be elevated as a sort of a first tier. On web, so this is not in-game, this is like website.
On website, okay.
Yeah,
so,
like a web
so for in-game chat on Fortnite, so just so I've understood what you said. You said that there is a tool which identifies bad words.
Yeah, there's like an automatic language filter. So if you try to write the F word, it would not display that.
Yeah, that's instantaneous.
Correct.
Okay. So you're seeing there have been reports of cases of grooming on the site on the game. You'll be familiar with those.
I have seen reports that there have been predators who may have tried to solicit people within Fortnite.
I'm aware.
Yeah.
I work with law enforcement.
Yeah, there was a report in the Daily Mail about a school in Cornwall that had warned parents that someone was seeking to groom children at the school to perform sexual acts and was threatening them and their families with physical violence if they refused to do so. Why do, again, this is similar to some of the questions we've asked some of the social media companies in the past. Why is it that it's taken a school to warn people about this? Why haven't this been spotted by Fortnite and action taken straight away?
I mean, for any kind of social communications, until an act has kind of been committed, it's basically impossible to identify that in advance. I'm not aware of a tool that exists where you can preemptively go in and identify a predator. I mean,
well, you can identify language people are using, can't you? You've obviously got a tool that's reading what people are posting because it's picking up keywords and doing it in real time.
It's like a blocker.
I mean, I feel like if we had some sort of natural language recognition tool that could figure out all of the nuances of various,
These tools exist. We took evidence yesterday from a company that makes them and deploys them around the world. These technologies exist.
I'm not aware of that. That would be effective inside of the game.
I'm sure that there's room for growth and sophistication on our side on that part. So we have taken steps so far. We do have things that Matt mentioned, and like I said, we actively cooperate with authorities whenever things are reported or report ourselves to the extent it comes through us. But I'm sure you're right that there is better technology that growth that we can do there.
Well, it's sort of how many? Remind me how many registered users are there in Fortnite?
We've announced over 250 million. 250
million. And that's people who play. We won't get back into the definition of regularly again, but that's people who are. Is that dormant? Does that include dormant accounts, or is that?
Some bulk of that will be accounts that no longer play.
What as a proportion? I mean, that what would you guess roughly?
We wouldn't disclose that information publicly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, given that you don't advertise through your platform, I'll forgive you that. But so the question is really: so you've got an AI system which is picking up certain keywords. And that's probably quite a limited range of words, I would imagine.
I think AI is probably an overstatement.
Yeah, I believe it's like an exclusion list of words.
Okay.
Of words that get filtered out from ever being displayed.
Yeah. So, but do you, even compared to what a social media company would use? I mean, we've got plenty of criticisms of Facebook and Instagram, but I mean, on Instagram, certain phrases, certain terms of interest will trigger a response from the platform and a challenge from the platform. But I'm not quite clear from what you said whether you have anything other than just this list of defined words which you would then respond to.
There's that, and then there's the player player reporting.
Yeah. So what happens when players report? What happens? So say someone's been feel they're being targeted with inappropriate content or being threatened by another player. What's the reporting mechanism?
Basically, there's a drop-down menu where you can report any player. You can select some sort of subcategory for what type of complaint it is, whether it's a bug, offensive behavior. There's a category of different responses that you can select from. Then there's the ability to put an option for a message describing kind of what the offense is. And then you can hit submit, and then that will be triaged by our player support team, who then goes and it actually gets sent to a real person who basically identifies and categorizes what type of complaint it is. And then there's a whole series of then separate just escalation process in terms of based on what the kind of complaint or offense is. There's a run book for how to deal with each individual case.
What is the time it would take? What's the timeline for the processing of the complaint that's been made?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but I can look into that information.
Is there a policy on that?
I would have to double check.
If in the online harms white paper, it suggests, for example, if social media companies are identified of existence of harmful content, they might have 24, 48 hours to remove that. Is that something Fortnite would be capable of, Epic would be capable of doing? Do you have that capability?
I'd have to double check based on the volume of requests that we get.
But that would certainly be, I mean, it would
think
be
that-
our intent.
Yeah.
How many people do you have working triaging complaints from users?
Thousands.
I mean,
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
maybe
not-
not directly employed, but
Well,
on a contract.
Yeah, but at any one time, how many people would be working, processing complaints like this?
I think thousands.
At any one time?
maybe less. Yeah.
Well, that's you
Maybe
might have
less
thousands
than
of
that.
contractors that do it.
Like
but
in this moment,
in
I'm
this
sure
moment
it's
in time,
24
how many-
hours.
So typically, right now, this moment in time, how many people will be doing this?
Certainly hundreds.
Yeah.
Right.
Hundreds.
I would-
Hundreds.
yeah.
Okay, so thousands might be the total number of contractors, but hundreds.
Correct.
Okay, hundreds for
At
a
least, yeah.
game played by hundreds of millions, not at the same time. But, I'd be interested, if you were able to write back and tell us what your policy is, do you have a company policy on the turnaround of the processing of complaints against users are making against content that could be considered threatening or harmful?
I mean, I know that our goal and what we strive for is basically immediate turnaround.
But that kind of stuff gets escalated. That sort of jumps
Yes,
ahead.
depending on the categorization of the complaint, certain ones get filtered to the top, and obviously something like that would go right to the top of the queue.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested as well. I mean, people following this of any experiences users have had as well about making these complaints. Because part of my concern is when you see reports appearing in the press about these sorts of issues, is often because they've gone undetected for a period of time. And I'm not convinced as well that other than a user making the complaint, that you've necessarily got the systems in place to identify this sort of behaviour for yourself.
Yeah, I think to Cannon's point, it's probably an area that we can invest more in and investigate more.
Yeah. Carry on, can you tell us a bit about what sort of policies Electronic Arts have in place to monitor chat between players?
Sure. So our in-game chat, which is voice chat and text chat, more often I'd say voice chat these days. We don't have a monitoring policy, or we don't have a tool to monitor or filter voice chat. We do have tools that the players can choose to mute certain people or to block people from engaging with them. We also have abuse reporting.
Sorry to interrupt you, so just for the benefit of the record.
Yeah.
So voice chat would enable players to talk to each other during the game?
Yes, exactly. And
Yeah.
so think about it, and often it's group chat, so think about our Battlefield game when you're on a squad. The voice chat is used to further your gameplay, so the squad can talk to each other. So I think there too, it means we have a little bit less of non-game related information sharing. It's not saying it can't happen, but it's really about furthering gameplay. One thing we are doing, and I don't have a lot of information about this, but had an opportunity to get a little insight on it. We're very focused at EA around trying to combat what we'll call toxicity. So that's just players behaving badly. We have a project we initiated with the University of Alberta that's specifically around using machine learning, natural language to be able to combat bad behavior in games, which may be voice chat. I think it's probably a ways out, but we take it seriously. We also held a summit, 2 weeks ago now in LA, and we brought together 250 influencers in the game community to talk about toxicity, healthy gameplay, and things we could do to make our environment better and happier for people. Our analytics team published some research just about a month ago in Medium, the publication Medium, specifically about this issue. So we take it very seriously. Again, for us, we want to do it because it's the right thing to do, but frankly, it's a commercial necessity. If we don't have a fun, healthy, happy, safe environment, people will not come play our games.
Again, do you have policies in place, as I was asking Epic, for the time it would take to process a complaint? How quickly would you be able to analyse and respond?
Yeah, I don't have an exact time for you. I do know, like Epic, we have a very large consumer experience group who's trained very well at this. So I would say typically we are very quick, and certainly anything that would be, highly harmful, I would like to believe that we would handle that immediately.
Okay, I'd be grateful. Let's send some to Epic. If you'd be able to write us and tell us just if you have a policy in terms of turnaround time, and also at any one moment in time, how many people will be working on triaging complaints?
Yeah, I don't feel like I could tell you how many I could certainly take that question back. We have policies. I don't know that we have a policy that specifically says it will be turned around in this amount of time. Doesn't mean we don't. I just don't know if we do.
Yeah, well, certainly. I mean, if you have a policy, I'd be interested if you have a policy. If you don't have a policy, whether we'd like to confirm you don't have a policy, but maybe you could give an indication of what you believe the typical response rate is. And then similar to Epic as well. I think rather than just giving us the global number of people that may be working on content moderation, many of whom are probably contractors, at any one time, how many people would be doing it during a typical day?
Okay, well, we can take that question back.
Okay. So one final thing I want to ask both companies as well, and that's just both Electronic Arts and Epic have Facebook login for your games. If I could start with Epic, presumably you would get age data about game players from Facebook if they log in through Facebook.
I don't believe that's the case. I don't believe we take that information.
Because Facebook gather that's whether or not it's true is a different matter, but nevertheless Facebook require people to give their age when they set up an account. So other games companies have said that others have said that the only age verification data they believe they have is data that's come from Facebook via Facebook login. So presumably Epic would collect the same data as well. Yeah,
and that kind of relates back to the point that we don't collect any extra information that we think we need, and so we would not take that information from Facebook.
Okay. Presumably that information would be available from Facebook if you wish to have it.
I'm not sure. I don't know what sort of an agreement needs to be in place for that kind of...
Could you say, you sort of lead on my next question, which is I'd be interested to know what the data sharing agreement you have with Facebook is as a consequence of having Facebook login.
The way I know it, and I'm not a technical expert on this topic, but we gather just enough information in order to proceed with the authentication process around having a Facebook account able to log into the game.
We use their public API. So
yeah, it's a public API that
a custom.
It's basically there's some sort of like a handshake type exchange that must occur in order to authenticate that this is a real user and a real account. That then we can associate any progression in the game or purchases in the game against.
Yeah, but presumably any Facebook user who's logging in, say to Fortnite through Facebook will be recording the number of times they log in, probably how long they remain logged in for.
I'd have to double check if they can tell how long somebody is. I don't believe so.
Not. It's really, I think it's like an open table, or like instead of creating your own account with OpenTable, you just log in through your Facebook account, and then you kind of OpenTable just sort of creates a like Facebook user 10,000 as on that side, but it's not like a
but Facebook part of the deal if you use Facebook login is that Facebook gets to collect data about what its users are doing through using that tool, so they'll certainly know when it's being activated, how frequently it is.
That's where I'd have to investigate if there is any sort of additional information as part of that authentication process. But
it'll be in the terms and conditions of the agreement. Facebook probably say people are aware of it, but I mean the login is also a data reciprocity tool as well. Otherwise, it wouldn't. That's one of the reasons it was designed. It has a particular value for Facebook for that reason. And what other than Facebook being able to identify when its users are logging into games like yours, what other data about the user experience on the game could Facebook gather?
That's what I'm not sure about. I think there may be something related to like a machine ID, like what kind of hardware you're logging in from. This would be something that probably we'd have to go back and talk to some folks about. I'm not as adept on like the technical data exchange that's occurring. In order to complete that.
Whether Facebook, I think if they keep data about not just when people log in, which they will obviously have, because people use the Facebook tool, how long they're logged in for, and if there's any other data about gameplay, including whether they make purchases or not, that Facebook are gathering as part of the tool.
I don't think, certainly they can't track any purchasing information.
Presumably when you said earlier on, response to Ms. Refford's questions, that you send marketing messages to people that haven't played for a while to encourage them to come back and play. So presumably to do that through Facebook, you would have to have Facebook data about Facebook users that haven't played for a while.
So when it comes to actual targeting, for advertisements on Facebook, we, again, take a very conservative approach in terms of sharing any sort of data or information with Facebook. And actually, Epic as a company, we don't provide any of that information in terms of being able to identify and target those groups. Facebook has existing groups that they have created that we can target in terms of advertising, but it's not information that we're contributing.
Well, they've got it already. They've already got it, so you don't have to give it to them because they know. If you say to Facebook, say, I want to send a marketing message to Facebook users that play Fortnite that haven't logged in for a month, and they know that because they know when they log in. So you can just do that as a tool.
I don't believe we can do it to that sort of specificity.
Well, of course you can. They hold the data. They won't give it to you, but you can go to them and say, well, look, there's the Facebook login tool. You know which Facebook users play Fortnite because they log in through your tool, and therefore I want to message those people or advertise to them a marketing message, and that's an audience Facebook can give you.
I do not believe that we do that.
You don't believe you do that?
Yeah.
So how do you use Facebook as a company, as a marketeer?
We use it to target general kind of gaming segments that are within perhaps like certain game genres and categories. So you might have a role-playing game or a shooter game that you would target as part of that.
So you target people, but I can understand how you do that to target people that aren't your customers. So you might say, look, Facebook's got data on people that play, because they probably capture the data from other logins as well, about people who play other shoot-'em-up games, and so I want to advertise to them. But to advertise to your own people through Facebook, you do it through the login data, wouldn't you?
Not through the login information, no. We use the general Facebook advertising tools. We don't upload, for example, some sort of list of all of the email accounts that we have in order to make a match and target those consumers. Yeah. Epic does not do that.
But that's a different. We don't want to get down to the weeds on this. Respect's a different thing. That is a tool you can use on Facebook. But actually, I'm just talking about people that use the Facebook login to log in to play Fortnite. You can go back to Facebook and ask to market to them because they know who they are because they use the tool and they know how frequently they log in.
I'd have to investigate specifically on that login. I totally understand what you're saying and understand that the capability seems like it should exist.
It does exist. It's obvious. If you're choosing not to do it, you're making your life a lot harder for no apparent reason.
I know we do. Yeah.
Similarly, perhaps Kerry and Sean could say what sort of data sharing agreement you have with Facebook for people that use Facebook login to access electronic arts games.
So we only use Facebook login on some mobile games. We don't use it on any of the console games that we talked about today. That's just not something we do. My understanding is that when players use Facebook to log in, Facebook sends us basically an EA-specific hash that basically acts as a token and says, yes, they can log in. This is the person. We get no other information from Facebook, and we don't share any information with Facebook.
So people can link their Facebook ID to their EA account?
I don't think we do that, actually. No, so that's...
So that was it just tells you how. This is from your website. Link your Facebook ID to your EA account. But all I was going to ask was what would be included in your EA account in that case?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I know for a fact that we do not share information with Facebook, and when people use their Facebook account to log in, all we get from Facebook is a hash. I'm happy to look in further to give you explanation of what that page means.
So on your site,
yeah.
So discover and play great games, connect with friends, personalise your experience and more. So presumably EA users use the Facebook, they link their accounts through Facebook, so they help them engage their friends with EA games. So they're connecting their Facebook friends list with their EA account.
So the question I thought you were asking me is when people use their Facebook ID to log in. So that's a very specific process we have with Facebook where you get to choose to use your Facebook ID and not have an account with us or not use a different account. That in that case, I know that all we get is a machine hash, a token. I don't know much, I don't know anything at all about that, and I'd be happy to go back and find out more.
Yeah, because this is on the EA site. It's sort of telling you how to do it.
Yeah.
And to me, what it sounds like is a way in which you can, through doing this, you're merging your Facebook friends data. It's the purpose of the tool, I would imagine, from Facebook's point of view, is it encourages other people, and for yours as well, it encourages people who are already EA customers to get their Facebook friends to sign up and play games with them on EA.
Yeah, I can't make a supposition, but I'm more than happy to look into that for you.
So I'd be interested with that as well, whether this is something the committee's looked at in the past, is to what extent Facebook then has access to data not just about EA customers who have Facebook accounts, but also their friends, if they're sharing their Facebook contacts back to.
Yeah, we can take a look. I mean, I think like Epic, we're pretty cautious about sharing, and certainly sharing any data that the consumer hasn't allowed us to share. But I don't have enough information to be very articulate on that.
Yeah, and so presumably as well, like as we discussed with Epic, I mean, Facebook, if people are using a login tool, then Facebook will be gathering information about when they log in and what games and so on.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I imagine as with Epic, you could mark it back to those users through Facebook using that data as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have information on that particular thing you're asking us about. I knew you would ask about the Facebook login, so I actually checked with our privacy team and confirmed it was just the hash. I didn't know you would ask that question, so I'm not prepared for that one.
Okay. I think that concludes the questions that we have. Thank you all very much. Thank you for travelling all this way to be with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.